The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
It's time to go on the mat, a presentation of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum. It's brought to you by Rolling Ford in Shell Rock.
Welcome to On the Mat. I am Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum. No Doug, no Jason. But who do we have other than a Waterloo, Iowa native? He went to Waterloo, Columbus. You ain't got nothing like the Mighty Finn. All right, there's nothing like him. His name's Mad Finn, Mike Finn. He's the editor of Wrestling Insider News Magazine. He's with us. We've had him on many times. Always enjoy his perspective. Welcome, Mike.
Kyle, thanks, man. I got to come up with a nickname for you. So you just Crazy Kyle? Is that okay? Or
I mean, yeah, as long as it's with a K. You know, the crazies with a K. Yeah, that's completely fine. But you are like in a massive time warp here with the Olympics. You've had junior nationals. You've had NCAAs. You've had the senior high school nationals. What's the most exciting for you? Is it the Olympics coming up? You get to go to Rio.
Oh, wow. I tell you what, let's face it, the past 12 months have been the best for anyone who follows wrestling, especially if you live close to Iowa. You think of all the things that happen within this state. It was, starting with grappling on the gridiron, Iowa, Oklahoma State, and then, of course, have the Big Tens here, have the Olympic trials here. It's just an incredible time.
And think about that for you. You live right there in Iowa City. Just out your front door, you have a few-minute drive, and then you're right there. That is unprecedented for any wrestling fan.
It is. And then now for me, be able to take this internationally to go to Rio, after nearly 12 months after being in Las Vegas for the Worlds, and get a taste of what the Olympics will be like, and now to head down to Rio and really what could be an incredible year for the United States in wrestling. You had
a nice role with the Olympic trials. You did some of the not play-by-play, but just some of the information for the wrestling broadcast there for NBC. You going to be doing more of that?
Yes, I sure am. Actually, this is the third straight Olympics I've done this. I did it in Beijing in 2008, and then for the London Games, actually, the NBC had us working out of the NBC studios in New York. Now, this year, they're actually sending the crew to Rio, and they plan to do a lot on wrestling, because I think they really believe they're going to see a lot of medals from the American wrestlers.
What do you think? You think there's going to be a lot of medals from Team USA?
Oh, I do. Actually, I predict at least 5, and I guess it's easy to look at the 5 who medaled for the United States last September. The gold medalists in Jordan Burroughs and Kyle Snyder, Adeline Gray, Helen Morales, and Andy Visick, who won a Greco bronze. I think all of them. I think should definitely win medals. If I was going to say gold, I'd say Burroughs and Gray for sure. Morales, silver, just because considering who is at that weight class from Japan is incredible. And then Kyle Snyder, if he wins gold 1 year after winning world gold, he could easily say he may be the best youngest American ever. But right now, I guess I have him penciled more for silver. And Visick, I could see actually winning another bronze. And then, of course, it's Olympics. There's always going to be a surprise. Who is it going to be? Is it going to be Frank Molinaro? Jaden Cox, a guy who didn't even have a passport to go overseas before he had to qualify the weight class after making the team. Yeah, he's been a big surprise. It'll be a lot of fun.
On the line with Waterloo, Iowa native Mike Finn. He's the editor of Wrestling Insider News Magazine. He's going to be in Rio covering the Olympics for NBC. And as we talk about potential medals, a lot of that is going to depend on if the Russians are going to be there. What's your insight on where the Russian wrestlers are going to be with this doping scandal?
Well, I think first of all, IOC simply passed the buck when they decided to hand it off to all of the sports, the federations. To make the decision. I frankly believe the Russians will compete in wrestling, and frankly, I welcome it. I mean, anybody who's old enough to remember the 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles, when the United States did incredibly well, but there were no Eastern Bloc teams, there were no Soviet wrestlers there. So, and I think it takes a little bit away from it. I just believe I believe if there was something for sure, the IOC would have actually ruled on it. And so I guess at this point, I believe Russian wrestlers will compete in Rio.
We're on the line with Mike Finn. Make sure you stick around. We have Chris Campbell on our next two segments, but right now we are talking about the International Olympic Committee and what they are doing with the Russian Federation. As we talk about that deeper, going back to the 1984 Olympics, it does make a difference. The United States had 7 gold medals in freestyle, 2 silvers, and then we had one guy didn't place out of the 10. But we're in a different era right now, Mike, with only 6 competitors. So you have such a finite amount of weight classes that you can compete. It makes it a lot more difficult to get those medals. Of course, it goes without saying. But what do you have to do to make sure that you have the right person at the weight?
Well, that's always a debate. United States, we simply have a qualifier. The Olympic trials is at least to make a team. Not every country does that. We've seen that, where just because they have a qualifying tournament, someone doesn't win it. If someone higher up believes that someone else needs to fit that role, that's what happens. I do believe this American team will be strong. I mentioned Jaden Cox. He qualified at a weight class where many people thought either Kyle Dake or David Taylor would have wrestled. But you got to hand it to him. He beat those guys, and he's done well internationally. He did well at the World Cup. Frank Molinaro is another guy. He beat Brent Metcalf. He did not have a lot of world experience, but he also did well at the World Cup. I just think this is where I believe where coaching will kick in. I'm so happy that Bill Zadig was named the future American freestyle coach. I think he's done real well. He has had a lot to do with the early success of Kyle Snyder being at the OTC in Colorado Springs. So I just think right now the people are put in the best position right now for the United States to do well.
You mentioned Adeline Gray, who was a world champion in 2015 in Las Vegas and the year before. Clearly the gold medal favorite, but really the darling of wrestling right now for female side was in the body issue of ESPN. What did that do? Mm-hmm. I mean, how has she changed the sport of wrestling and how we view it?
Oh, I'm not sure if she actually needed to do that to make an impact. Winning gold medals in Rio will make bigger impact than anything she does PR-wise or whatever, because she's got that friendly smile. She can show that women can be both tough and beautiful, frankly. I mean, that's what the message is. Helen Morales could be the same person type of thing. But Adeline Gray is someone who actually stand up and look at your eye, talk to you. She has so much passion in what she does and who she's representing. Not just the United States. She's representing young women. She's representing people from her state. I think it's a great story, but yes, I would be shocked if she did not win a gold medal.
Jordan Burroughs has won gold medals in 4 of the last 5 Olympics or Worlds, had a bronze medal in 2014. As we look at Jordan Burroughs and what he's accomplished, he wants to go another cycle. He wants to go through 2020. Do you think he can maintain that pace, Mike?
Oh, yeah, I do believe. Let's face it, he's really not that old yet. So I think he definitely can. Again, there's some young talent coming up that weight class that I think will challenge him. But I believe that Burroughs just has so much experience. He's talking about having things put in place. His personal life it would almost seem perfect to where he is right now. To have a wife who totally understands what he's doing, and he honors her by reminding people of the commitment she's made. The fact that he has 2 children now. So there's so much to him. W.I.N magazine went on the record as saying that he needs to bring the American flag in to represent the United States contingent in Rio. I strongly believe that. I don't know of any American athlete in any sport that truly emphasizes what the Olympics should be for an athlete, for what they put into it, where nobody else knows the training these guys and women go through. I think that is Jordan Burroughs.
Across the board, you're a historian and you've lived through some of this. Put in perspective where Jordan Burroughs' transcendent personality and what he's been able to do for the sport of wrestling, where that fits in along the line. Cael Sanderson was big, Dan Gable was big, Dan Hodge. Has Jordan Burroughs been able to do what some of those other guys have done?
Oh, Oh, yeah, but I think he takes it a step farther. Almost all those gentlemen that you talked about were obviously incredible champions. When they did that, they were not the most PR-oriented. They didn't really care about the media. They didn't really care about getting their message out beyond what they do on the mat. Jordan Burroughs takes that extra. You know, he does a column for W.I.N magazine, and the things he talks about are so deep. And he reminds you about what it means to be successful, not just in this sport, but in life. And so that's what's incredible about Jordan Burroughs. So, yes, I mean, if he wins gold in Rio, if he comes back in 2020 and does it again, he easily or should be called the best American wrestler ever.
On the line with Mike Finn, editor of Wrestling Insider News Magazine. Mike is going to be in Rio for the 2016 Olympics, working and covering the Olympic Games on the wrestling side for NBC. You covered wrestling in a significant way. You always go to Fargo for the Junior Nationals. You were just there. Your take on this very important tournament for a lot of people in the United States?
It's very important. Now, it does not draw the elite junior or cadet, or let me say, elite junior wrestlers like it used to. But because a lot of these wrestlers are already tied up in making junior world teams and that type of thing. But the guys that are there, the talent is still so strong. You know, if I'm an Iowa State University wrestling fan, you got to be so excited. 5 of your recruits from this past year made the finals. 4 of those won championships. You know, so the Iowa State, you know, Kevin Jackson, obviously, he has some incredible talent coming to Ames. So that could be very, very, very fun in the next 4 years.
So as far as Iowa State goes, this has been a topic of conversation as they had all of that talent after Cale left, and then it was a difficult time for Iowa State. What's the vision? I mean, can this happen in the next 3 years? If you put the pieces together, can they get a trophy again?
Well, you know, Kevin Jackson, my belief on him, first of all, because he hadn't been coaching in college for a long time after taking the national team as a freestyle coach. But I think he had to adapt to get back to understanding what it takes to recruit. I believe he is a good coach. I believe, you know, will he be able to bring some discipline to that program? Because I think sometimes that's what the best programs have. Those that the young men are, you know, they see what's set ahead of them. They don't necessarily need a coach always reminding about this or that. They're dedicated to do it. So, yeah, I believe Iowa State could be special in the next 5 years, next 4 to 5 years.
When you're at Junior Nationals, one of the things that strikes me in the 1 year that I went there is just the culture that they have there, and you see it on display with the trading of singlets and the exchange of singlets and everything that goes into it. Is that where you really see wrestling culture in its truest form?
You just see the kids. In my mind, when you see that, you see these young wrestlers for frankly being kids or young people, that type of thing. And because, you know, right, the singlet is so important, and to see them out there, and, you know, they collect, they trade, they sell, and I think they have a lot of fun. And more than that, just to see the mixture from all these different states, you know, and how all these people young people talk to each other. What a way to develop some confidence in young people.
We've talked about this, Mike, at that 08 Junior Nationals that we both happen to be a part of. Is that the grasp on history is that a lot of these guys and these kids don't know who some of the past champions are, and it still seems like that's a problem 8 years later. What's the solution on that? Is it just kids don't care? Do we have to educate them more? How do we get these kids to understand who the great champions of the past are?
I think they have to educate them more, and who's the people going to educate them? Of course, USA Wrestling, that could be a good task for them to do, to remind people, young people, about who has been there and that type of thing, and how this event even started. You know, it used to be in Cedar Falls at one time. It used to be in Iowa City at one time before going to Fargo. And at that time, it was just a junior tournament. Now, of course, it's junior and cadet, and now there's women's wrestling as well. So it's I believe, obviously, I'd say the whole sport does. But there needs to be a leader in that, and I think at this point it has to be USA Wrestling.
On the line with Mike Finn of Wrestling Insider News Magazine. We're talking Rio for the Olympic Games. We're talking Fargo for Junior Nationals. Overall, what state came away and impressed you at the Junior Nationals?
Well, Illinois is always lead with the most All-Americans. But I would say they probably would feel like they did not have the best tournament considering the number of competitors they have. I mean, it's just enormous. I think of the numbers, I'd have to look at it. Basically, they had like nearly 350 wrestlers in these different styles, and they came away overall with 5 champs, 68 All-Americans. And then, of course, California, they had like 275 entries. They had 7 champs, 58 All-Americans. Now, of that, 5 of their champs came in women's wrestling, either cadet or junior. Pennsylvania did real well in the junior freestyle, as did Minnesota. Actually, Minnesota had like 3 champs there. So, that's very impressive. The state of Iowa, basically they tied with New York with having the most All-Americans. They had 30. And they had 3 champions. So I think those states obviously did well. I just you pretty much know what states put the most money, effort, people into developing the talent and making it important that kids want to go to Fargo. Illinois is by far the best state at that.
Spencer Lee is a big-name recruit that Iowa landed. He verbally committed to the University of Iowa. For those who don't follow wrestling as much, how good is Spencer Lee, and how good is he going to be at the University of Iowa?
Well, he should be incredible. I mean, once again, assuming that the people that are working with him and he's had great people working with him, can keep his mind straight, keep him healthy. Now, he was not in Fargo because I believe he is also on the world team. So, another young man, Gavin Teasdale, who is going to be just a junior this year, who had already committed to Iowa, won a championship in Fargo. And it was a fun visit for me to talk to him, and also his club coach, Jody Strittmatter, a former Hawkeye, on what it's like for a young man from the state of Pennsylvania to move to Iowa, to wrestle in Iowa, which at this time are the 2 biggest rivals in college wrestling, that being Penn State and Iowa, of those. And so it'll be really interesting to see how that young man adapts as well.
Hey, you live in the Iowa City area. Andy Hamilton just took a job with track wrestling. Any chance we get you to move back to Waterloo, Mike?
Well, as long as my mom was there, I'll always be making trips. But what a great move by Andy Hamilton. What a great move by track wrestling. They've always had a lot of, they've been involved with wrestling for a long time, simply by just having data, having results, that type of thing. And to bring a professional like Andy Hamilton in to create something, and then Shane Sparks, who many people know he's more of a broadcaster, who has more energy than 10 people combined in this business, who get things going. So actually, I'm very excited about that. And from what I understand, I believe he's going to be doing some work out of the museum up there in Waterloo. So this will be a great move for wrestling, a great move for Andy.
All right, Mike, thanks for joining us. We always enjoy your insight. All the best as you go down to Rio. Up next, we have a very special guest. Chris Campbell was an Olympian at the age of 37. He won the bronze medal at the age of 37 in 1992. He is next on the mat, 1650 The Fan.
1650 The Fan, KCNZ.
We are back on the mat, 1650 The Fan. I am Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum. Thanks to Mike Finn for a great opening segment. Our next guest has a piece of history with Dan Gable. Dan Gable's first year as head wrestling coach was the 1976-1977 season. His first NCAA champion was this man. Chris Campbell was a 2-time NCAA wrestling champion for the University of Iowa. Made the 1980 Olympic team world champion in 1981, and then made a big comeback in 1990 at the age of 35. Got a world silver medal in 90, 5th place in 91, and at the age of 37, won a bronze medal at the 1992 Olympic Games. Chris Campbell, what an honor to have you on the program. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's nice to talk to you.
Well, it's great to talk to you, and it's Olympic time. You have experience in the Olympics of not going in 1980 and then going in 1992 when it gets Olympic season. Does it heighten your awareness and heighten your competitive juices as you remember the Olympic Games?
I'm so old that I sort of have lost sort of that feeling. But it is interesting to watch the guys prepare, and I remember, sort of both the anxiety and the excitement of trying to make an Olympic team and then competing in the Olympic Games.
I remember a comment you made, and I think you made this, and maybe you could clarify that if you had to do it again, you wouldn't put your body through what you did to prepare. Was that fairly accurate?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Not at all. I've got a lot of injuries, right? But I really enjoyed what I did. And it's pretty interesting because, I think everybody goes through a period of time where they sort of hate wrestling, and I went through that period of time. And then, I wrestled for a while, and then when I came back as an older wrestler, I really had a great appreciation just for competition. And so it was my last 3 years of wrestling was complete joy,
When you started late in wrestling, you started, I believe, your sophomore year of high school. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think it was in ninth grade, not
10th
10th.
grade?
It was in ninth grade. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, a late start, and you got good pretty quick. I know there's a great recruiting story about how Dan Gable came out there, and you were talking a little bit of smack with him when he came out to this speaking engagement. Take us through how that transpired and how you came to the University of Iowa all the way from the East Coast.
Well, I didn't compete in high school until my senior year because I was doing the ministry, so other commitments were really heavy. So I didn't keep my junior year, so nobody really knew who I was. And I did win the states, but I was only being recruited by East Coast teams, like Maryland and smaller colleges. And I think it was a college in Montclair State, who the coach was recruiting me for the head coach. But when I decided I was going to go to Maryland, the assistant coach called me up and said, "Hey, I can't let you go to Maryland. You got too much talent. There's a guy out in Iowa called Dan Gable. I think you should be with him." And it just so happened, I think that was right after the Olympics, and Dan came and talked to. He came and talked to my high school. He did a speaking engagement, there in New Jersey, which was kind of funny. And I walked up to him because I was a really arrogant little wrestling kid, told him I'd kick his butt. And so I didn't hear anything more about it. But then I think Curlmeyer got wind of the fact that I wanted to come, and so I got a job in Iowa City. I sold my car and got an airplane ticket, my first flight, to go out to Iowa City and start working in a factory scrubbing excess stuff off of car door handles. So that's how I started with Iowa, and I was a walk-on my first year, and I had a job throughout my first year. But then after I won the Big Tens my first year, then I got a full scholarship.
So what's that like coming into the University of Iowa? You mentioned that as being your first plane trip, and it's a new time. How do you cope with the transition coming from New Jersey to the University of Iowa and just the different culture? Was there a rough transition that you had to make?
Well, I think for me there was a major culture shock, because I'm coming from the East Coast, about 45 minutes from the city, and the whole. The things that guys were telling me to watch out for when I went out to Iowa was kind of hilarious. Obviously, none of those things are true, but when I came to Iowa, it definitely was an adjustment because it's a different culture.
Who did you connect with right away? Was there anyone that kind of got your foot in the door and helped you out?
Well, there was actually a couple of folks who I started to hang out with at the factory that I was working with. And, they weren't wrestlers.
Okay.
They were nice people.
Okay.
But I would go to the wrestling practices that they would have after I'd work. I'd go to wrestling practice at Iowa, which was really good because then I was actually training for, I think it's the Junior Nationals. And I got to wrestle with Dan. I can tell you a story about that.
Yeah, tell us, because I know that there's some legendary stories about you guys competing in the room.
Yeah, so, as I said, I told Dan I was going to kick his butt at his speaking engagement. And then, when the first time we were going to wrestle at Iowa, I told him I was going to kick his butt. And then when I did, I took him down like in the very first 2 seconds, a real fast takedown. And he got really, really upset and proceeded to beat me up for about an hour. At the end of the practice, I felt like I had 2 dislocated shoulders. I had no skin on either side of my face because of mat burns. I was sort of sitting huddled in the corner, in a state of shock. So that was my first practice. And then from then on, he took pleasure in beating me up whenever he felt like it.
So pretty much your entire Iowa career, Dan, could take you?
Oh, for no question, yeah, and anybody else in the room.
And that's that does have to be pretty humbling. How do you cope with that when you're trying to compete and say, hey, my coach, who's lighter than me, can actually take me in practice?
Well, I mean, it was Dan Gable, so there was no shame in that. It was just fear. And if you were in a practice with him and you weren't practicing hard, he wasn't going to yell at you. He was going to wrestle with you. And you definitely didn't want that because you were in for a long day. So, Dan would beat Chris Taylor, up. And, what was Chris Taylor, three something?
Yeah, upwards of 4, yeah.
Yeah, so, it was just different. It certainly was. It was not humbling. I mean, the one thing you felt like, well, if I can actually survive in this room with this guy, I can wrestle anybody.
On the line with Chris Campbell, 2-time NCAA wrestling champion for the University of Iowa. He was Dan Gable's first NCAA wrestling champion when Dan Gable was the head wrestling coach at Iowa. 1981 world champion, 1980 Olympian, and a 1992 Olympic bronze medalist. We're talking about your career at the University of Iowa and how you made that transition. And you became a 2-time NCAA champion, and the progress that you were able to make pretty quick when you think about senior year in high school, really got involved. How do you make progress like that? How do you get so good so fast and really climb up the ladder? And you're in that ilk of people that can be considered one of the best in Iowa wrestling history and maybe the best to come through the University of Iowa.
Well, I think it's coaching. I had Jay Robinson as an assistant coach. I had Dan Gable to beat me up anytime I wasn't working hard enough, and Jay Robinson to really coach me on certain technique and really a firm technical foundation. And that firm technical foundation that Jay built for me served me all the way through. And I think that's one of the reasons why I could come back after taking 4 years off, because my positioning and my technique was so solid, that I didn't any longer have to just work on speed. Because when I was in my youth, I was faster than anybody. I mean, nobody was fast as me. And in fact, I was faster than I could think sometimes. I'd be in on a guy and have taken him down, and before I even knew that I was ready to shoot. So I was a lot faster than people. But as I got older, obviously, I just became about the same speed. So the positioning and technique became more important. That's where Jay Robinson came in. And that's why I proved so fast, too.
One of the champions of this area was the head wrestling coach at Waterloo East High School. One of your great rivals, Willie Gadsden, is really a treasure to this community even to this day. What was it like competing against a guy like Willie?
Oh, it was really tense. Willie had the power and close to the speed, if not the speed that I had. He just didn't have the coaches I had, and that's why I was able to beat him most of the time, just because I had Dan Gable and I had Jay Robinson. He didn't have those guys. But I tell you an interesting story about Willie. We became good friends when I was after I graduated. I came in some really hard economic times. And Willie came down with a pickup truck and loaded me up from my apartment and took me to Iowa State, where I got a coaching job there. And it really changed my life in terms of being able to survive and me continuing in wrestling. And so that was really, we were close friends all the way through. In fact, we were hoping to make the 1980 team together, him at 198, but he hurt his knee, and so he couldn't try out for the 1980 team.
1980 is still a year that a lot of people remember. A lot of people talk about that it was the year that Jimmy Carter boycotted the Summer Olympic Games because of the Soviet Union's invasion into Afghanistan. We've had a lot of that 1980 team on this program, where there was Chuck Yeagla, Gene Mills, Lee Kemp. They have their take. What's your take on missing out on that opportunity?
It was devastating because essentially it was my life work. It was, wrestling was sort of my greatest gift to the world, to the extent that we all have gifts and we give it to the world. Every one of us does. Wrestling was mine. And I was in my prime in 1980. I was beating guys by 10 points. I beat the defending Olympic gold medalist by 10 points to make the Olympic team. And I mean, I was really ready in 1980. If you ask people who watched me wrestle, it was the best I've ever been, and nobody was close to me. So it was completely devastating. It is still devastating. You don't get over somebody taking away your life's work for nothing. And so Carter's not my most favorite guy. And as I became involved politically into the system, I realized how horrible the things he did to force people out of the Olympic Games. I mean, he threatened the Olympic Committee that he would take away their tax status if they didn't boycott those games. So they had a gun to their head. And I just think that was totally inappropriate.
Was it gratifying to win the World Championships the next year? Did that make up for it at all?
Yeah, I mean, winning the World Championships was, aside from the birth of my children, the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. For one important reason, I think we all strive for doing things, and you all have a sort of a sense of doubt, whether you can accomplish something. And I know I had been talking about being the best in the world since I was an 11th grade kid in high school. To actually become the best in the world, I just look back at the work that I did, how I prepared, both watching films, making sure I worked out twice a day, making sure my body was in really good shape, and really studying technique. I went to different places in the country to learn different things from different people. And I look back on that, and I said, if I put this amount of effort into anything, I'm going to be successful. So for me, it was a validation for me, but it was also an education in that if I really put hard work into things and made sure I studied in every area, that I could do anything I wanted to.
Why did you decide to step away from wrestling and go into law?
Well, it was initially, I think, about 1983 that I decided to retire and go to law school. Law school was always something I wanted to do. Back in 1970, I think it was 79, I was studying for the law school bar exam, but the law school entrance exam. I didn't take that, but I did end up doing it in 1983, I think it was. And I just didn't want to be really, really poor anymore. I'd struggled for about 4 or 5 years. I had a kid. I was married. I had a kid by the time. And, trying to figure out how to pay the rent every month is just not fun. And so I just wanted to, that's why I decided to go to law school.
On the line with Chris Campbell, two-time NCAA wrestling champion from the University of Iowa, might be the greatest Hawkeye wrestler ever. He's certainly in the mix for that. He was a member of the 1980 Olympic team and a 1981 world champion. As we talk about how you grew in the sport, one of the things that I think you're a vegetarian, right?
That's right. I'm a lacto-ovo vegetarian. That's
okay.
Right.
How did that come about? I think you got Lee Kemp into that. How did you become that?
Well, I mean, to be serious, I think I first learned about vegetarianism watching Star Trek. Mr. Spock was a vegetarian. And then the idea really sort of struck me that, I didn't really feel like killing animals to continue to live if I could live without killing animals. So that was my first reason for wanting to do it. But then as I started to really study up on nutrition, I found that a vegetarian diet was the best diet for the body in terms of performance. And so, not many people sort of believe that, but that's what my research was showing. So I switched over, and it took 2 years, from 77 to 79. By the end of 79, I was completely a lacto-ovo vegetarian. I'd stopped eating meat.
Lee Kemp is an icon in our sport, three-time world champion. He also missed out on that 1980 Olympic team. You were on teams together during that time. Relationship with Lee Kemp, is that something that you guys had a great friendship then, and you still have one now?
Sure, yeah. We were really, really good friends. I mean, in terms of, he was in Wisconsin or wherever he was, and I was in Iowa. So we didn't speak every day, but we were definitely close friends. I think we were roommates traveling in a lot of teams. Lee was obviously just a special human being. That guy was so strong. He was stronger than me, and I was a weight class above him. I can remember wrestling him in practice. It's like him and I think it was Mark Johnson. Those two were the strongest human beings I think I've ever run into.
How did you guys practice against each other? Because you were 180 and a half at the time. Lee Kemp was 163, so that was the next weight class down. I would like to think that you guys worked out and that those matches were pretty spectacular.
Yeah, we did work out. I think he beat me up most of the time, as I can recall.
Really?
He was so strong. Oh yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Because it wasn't in the match. I mean, I would get him in the match, right? Nobody beats me in the match, but no, he was just an unbelievable athlete. I mean, he's just a whole different caliber of a human being. There's only one Lee Kemp in terms of speed, power. I mean, of course, his intelligence as well. So the combination of it was just devastating. And he was pretty fast. I mean, he wasn't as fast as me, but he was fast, and he was just so powerful. Really, nobody should have been within 10 points of him ever in any matches. But he was very conservative, so he always had close matches. But if he ever let it go, and sometimes he did occasionally, I mean, you could just see it was, there's a reason why he's a three-time world champ.
On the line with Chris Campbell, two-time NCAA wrestling champion for the University of Iowa. We have more with Chris Campbell. This has been a special segment. We're going to talk more about the 1992 Olympic team, making that, getting a bronze medal at the 92 Olympics, and then your comeback in 1990. More with Chris Campbell next on the mat, 1650 The Fan.
1650 The Fan, KCNZ.
We are back on the mat, 1650 The Fan. I am Kyle Klingman of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum. Our second segment with Chris Campbell, maybe the greatest Iowa Hawkeye wrestler ever. He was a two-time NCAA wrestling champion for the University of Iowa. He was Dan Gable's first NCAA wrestling champion in 1977, 1980 Olympian, 1981 world champion, and then won a bronze medal at the 1992 Olympic Games. We talked about you stepping away from wrestling. You got your law degree in 1983, and then you make a comeback. After 7 years at the age of 35, you come back in 1990, win a silver medal at the 1990 World Championships. Take us through that, because that is an amazing journey, Chris, that you take 7-year layoff and then you're able to step right back in 1990, move up a weight class, and win a silver medal at the 1990 World Championships. What goes into that decision to come back?
Well, at the time, I mean, I graduated from law school in '84, and then I started working for a carrier corporation, and they had me living in Connecticut for about 7 months, and then I got transferred out to their subsidiary, which was Carrier Corporation in Syracuse, New York. That put me, up there with the Syracuse wrestling team, and they had a wrestler called Mark Kerr, who was around my weight class. And Mark Kerr, was a little bit of a troubled youth, so I put a lot of time and energy into him. But what I noticed was I was bored at work, but in the mornings before work I would weightlift, and in the run. In the afternoons I would go weightlift, and then in the evenings 3 days a week I would go over and work out with the Syracuse team. Now I had been long past the time where I could wrestle 4 or 5 days a week because I just couldn't recover. My body would fall apart. But at the 3 days a week of wrestling, I realized that I'm working out at a level where I could compete world class. So I tried out. So I first came out in 1989, and I think I got second in nationals to Jim Shear, just because of from some of the technical mistakes I made. And then at the World Team Trials, I got crushed by Dan Shade, who I crushed just a month before. I mean, it looked like he'd gained about 20 pounds of muscle, and he just crushed me in '89. It was quite a stark change. And then in 1990, I tried out again. I had corrected my mistakes, and I made the world team, and then got second in the world to Kardashev, which was a thrill. Although I was heartbroken because I hadn't lost in the finals for quite a while, and I always thought to myself, if I get in the finals, I'm going to always win. So that was a little bit of crushing for me, but that was a process. It was just, I was very happy training, and I was very happy wrestling.
And through it all, there's a guy that was competing during that time that you knew well. Tell us about your relationship with Dave Schultz.
Well, Dave was important to me for a lot of reasons, but he was a really great coach. So at the time when I was starting to come back, Dave was sort of transitioning in and out of whether he wanted to be a coach or wanted to be a wrestler. And so I would spend a lot of time on the farm, the Foxcatcher farm. I'd go there every Thanksgiving and all the Christmas time we'd spend together, and I would train there as well. And you know, I became close friends with Dave. Dave had the kind of personality that he made everybody feel like he was their best friend. And so that was something special. You know, not many people have that quality, but he had that. And so we spent a lot of time together talking, and he was just a great wrestling mind. I think, you know, we had some really good performances from, I think, 1984 onward, and I think a lot of that was coaching of Dave.
On the mat with Chris Campbell, two-time NCAA wrestling champion for the University of Iowa, 1981 world champion, and 1992 Olympic bronze medalist. That 92 bronze medal, 37 years old, you get a bronze medal at the Olympics. How gratifying was that to culminate your career with an Olympic medal?
I think it was more of a relief that I got a medal than, I wrestled for Dan, right? Our point of view was you go in to win. So, you know, anything but the gold medal was really disappointing. I'd always visualized myself getting a gold medal. So it was sort of heartbreaking to get a bronze. At the same time, you know, I realized that, I could have lost to a couple of guys there at the World Championships, the Olympic Games. It was not an easy road for me where I was in sort of my physical development. I wasn't as dominant, as powerful as I was when I was, 26. So there's no way that, I really could have lost. So I had a really good Olympic Games, except for my first match with Karatsev. But in my last two matches, I had sudden death overtimes, which I sort of took pride in. And I beat these guys who were, 10 years younger than me in overtime twice. So I was really happy to get the bronze, but disappointed as well.
That was a unique era because it was a colorful era for the United States with international wrestling. You had Zeke Jones, Brad Penrith, Kendall Cross in there, John Smith, and Kenny Monday, Kevin Jackson. The names go on and on about great legends and great icons within our sport. Coming back and being a part of the old and the new, what was that like being kind of the old guard and having the mix of the new and the old together?
It was interesting because they called me Grandpa, right? But we had a great team. I don't know if you mentioned Baumgartner as the heavyweight,
yeah, Bruce,
but he
of course.
He was a hell of an athlete. I can remember I walked up to Bruce when we first started. I first come back again, which is what I do all the time. I walked and said, "I'm going to kick your butt." Right? I don't know why. What compels me to go up to guys like that? And I'm looking at it, and while I'm saying it, I'm saying it to him. I'm saying this guy is going to crush me. And so we actually had a wrestling practice one day at the Foxcatcher farm, actually. And again, like I did with Gable, I took him down. The first 3 or 4 times, I think I took him down. And then he got serious. And then he just crushed me. It was something. But and then watching John Smith wrestle with the way things he was doing, being really low to the mat. I hate the style. But with John, you had to appreciate it. And he was so smart in terms of his strategy, how he did things. For me, I was just at awe a lot of times. And Kenny Mundy, I'll talk about Kenny Mundy. Kenny Mundy should have been a 2-time Olympic gold medalist. And at the 92 games, a week before the Olympic Games, he totally dislocated I don't know if it was his left or his right arm. I was there. I watched the arm bend the wrong way. And I was thinking, oh, this guy's done. He went through the Olympics 92 with one arm and got a silver medal. That is the greatest athletic performance I've ever seen.
When you went to international tournaments, how did people respond to you? If you went to Iran or Bulgaria, what was the response when you would step on the mat or you'd interact with people?
Yeah, it was, I don't know if people knew me. And so I spent a lot of time traveling in Russia. I don't know if, I never wrestled in Iran. Maybe Bulgaria a few times, Bulgaria once or twice, Sofia, Bulgaria, or Varna, Bulgaria, for the World Championship. So the people were pretty friendly. I I obviously talk about Dave Schultz. Watching the Russians respond to Dave Schultz, to the Georgians, was amazing. They treated him like he was God. They had pictures up around of him at the Tbilisi Championships. Nobody else, not even their own wrestlers, but they had the big posters all around the stadium, with Dave Schultz, to show you what kind of impact this guy had. And he was speaking their language and so forth. It was pretty interesting to watch.
On the line with Chris Campbell, two-time NCAA wrestling champion for the University of Iowa. Maybe a lot of people don't know that you were an assistant coach at Iowa State, and one of the people that gives you unbelievable amount of credit for developing his career and building his mind is Jim Gibbons. Talk about what you took from the University of Iowa and implemented at Iowa State, because a lot of people credit you as the reason Iowa State was good in the early 80s.
Well, Jim Gibbons was sort of just a gift. I loved working with Jim. To this day, I really, really love Jim. And there's a couple of interesting stories I can tell you. But what I did was I instituted a 2-day policy in terms of when you work out at least 2 or 3 months before the national championships, you've got to be working out twice a day, and we're going to have twice-a-day practices. So we'd have morning runs or morning weightlifting, and made sure everybody was doing it. But that's Gable all the way. And then I also made sure that we were doing yoga. And that was a little bit different. Dan wasn't so much into yoga, but I implemented some yoga. And then in the afternoons, I made sure we spent a lot of time doing technique. And obviously that's Jay Robinson's influence on me. But Jim, I noticed, had the great shot, and he could escape. So he was a really good wrestler, but he couldn't finish. Every time he get in, and if he's going to be wrestling somebody like Randy Lewis, who, if you didn't finish perfect, he's going to throw you in your head. So with him, it was sort of like one of those quick fixes. I said, okay, this is his problem. We're going to do finishes. We're going to do finishes every day, and we're going to drill with throwing dummies to finish and over again. And, he went through it at the national championship. It was his senior year, I believe. And he beat, like, Ricky Delgado. I mean, his weight class, Randy Lewis was in it, guy from Lehigh. He had to have the best weight class, the toughest weight class, maybe even ever in the history of the NCAA, and he went through and won it. So we were thrilled. And then I know that, Harold Nichols had me as assistant coach. He wanted to bring me back down to sort of a off salary, but would pay me as a coach because I wanted to keep competing. And I think he told Jim that he wanted to bring him on. And Jim was pretty depressed about it because he knew that it was going to be taking my place. And I told him, hey, you just got to, do what you got to do. And so, he obviously became a coach and won the national championship. And I couldn't be prouder of anybody than Jim Gibbons, that's for sure.
Do you wish you would have stayed in coaching?
Yeah, I really wish I would have been given that opportunity. When I got out of law school, I applied to Michigan State, and they hired a guy who was a Greco wrestler for their wrestling program over me, and that bothered me for a long time because that guy, was probably a very good Greco person, but there's no way he could have done what I did with Michigan State. Obviously, I don't think Michigan State did too well, and their wrestlers suffered. But that was a real turning point in my life, and I'm really sad about the fact that I never got a chance to coach.
On the line with Chris Campbell, 1992 Olympic bronze medalist, 1980 Olympian, 1981 world champion. Real quick here, what are you up to now?
Well, I'm an attorney in San Francisco. I do a lot of, if you've been watching some of the Olympic stuff, the doping stuff, I'm what they call a CAS arbitrator. I'm a member of the International Court of Arbitration for Sport. So if somebody tests positive for drugs, or if somebody has any other kind of violation or dispute in the Olympic world, I can hear their case as an arbitrator, like a judge, at the highest level. So I've done a lot of that. I've had a lot of big cases, Floyd Landis, Tyler Hamilton, who's the 100-meter guy? And I forget it.
Justin Gatlin?
Yeah, Gatlin. I've had those cases. But then I also do just personal injury stuff I work with insurance companies. So if somebody gets in a car accident and you have insurance with Liberty Mutual or Safeco, then they may hire me to represent you if you're sued.
All right. Do you, if you and Gable were in a wrestling room, what do you think? You think you could take him today?
Well, I think both of us are like really, really beat up. So we're point to point. I mean, I don't know how many operations Dan has had. I think he's had way too many. I have a hip that bothers me and a shoulder that bothers me. Fortunately, my shoulder never bothered me when I was wrestling. So I'm far from the days where I could wrestle, but I stay away from wrestling rooms because I know if I walk in the room, then I'm going to be tempted to jump on somebody in there. That's the worst thing I could do.
So now, do you still have that swagger? Do you still talk smack?
I don't put myself in a position to be able to talk smack. But if I did, I would. Because I can remember I came back to Iowa for some event. And there was this, I think he was a 177-pound wrestler. He came up to me, he said, "Oh, Chris Campbell, it's really nice to meet you. I always wanted to see how it would be to wrestle with you." And I looked at him, I said, "Well, let's go." And that's not healthy, right? That's my mentality. You want to wrestle, let's go.
Well, this has been fantastic. Thank you for joining us today. What an honor to have you on. Always wanted to have you on the program. It's great to have you on for 2 segments. Hope we can do it again. There's other topics we can discuss, but thanks for joining us in the great state of Iowa.
Kyle, nice talking to you.
All right, that was Chris Campbell. He might be the greatest Iowa wrestler ever. There's a lot of people, including Chuck Yeaglett, who will say yes. It was a lot of fun to talk to Mike Finn and then Chris Campbell, and keep following the situation with the Russians and the doping scandal. For Scott Fensloff, Mike Finn, and Chris Campbell, I'm Kyle Klingman. You've been listening to On the Mat on 1650 The Fan.
You've been listening to On the Mat, a presentation of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Dan Gable Museum, and brought to you by Rolling Forward in Shell Rock on 1650 The Fan, KCNZ.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.